Felix Colton stood quietly at the edge of his daughter's bed, watching the soft rise and fall of her chest. 8-year-old Joy had finally drifted back into sleep after another nightmare. Her tiny fists still clutched the edge of her blanket, as if holding on to something that could keep her safe. Felix brushed a strand of hair from her damp forehead, his heart aching at the sight. It had been a year since Carol's death, yet her presence still lingered in every corner of the house. The echo of her laughter clung to the walls, and her voice, gentle, teasing, alive, seemed to carry down the hallway in the stillness of night. Felix often found himself turning his head, half expecting her to step into the room with that radiant smile. But she never did. The heart attack had been swift, cruel, and merciless. 31 was too young, far too young, and Felix could not reconcile how life had stolen her away. One moment she was beside him, vibrant and full of plans, and the next, gone. Now all he had was Joy, fragile and grieving, and a house that no longer felt like home. Felix whispered into the silence, "I'll keep her safe, Carol. I promise." Felix sat in his dimly lit study, the phone pressed against his ear. His voice was low, edged with exhaustion. "Josh, I don't know what to do anymore. Joy's gotten worse. She's shutting down, withdrawing from everything she used to love. She won't even touch her parrot, the toy Carol gave her when she was 4. The school says she's falling behind. I feel like I'm failing her." There was a pause on the other end before his brother's steady voice came through. "Felix, it isn't that you're failing her. Joy is craving something you can't give, at least not fully. She's missing a woman's touch, the warmth of a mother's compassion. No matter how much you love her, there's a piece of her, grief you can't fill." Felix clenched his jaw. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to think about her future. I have a list of women, socialites, strong candidates, women who could step into Joy's life as a mother figure. They'd also fit the role of Mrs. Colton of Colton International." Felix's voice hardened. "Josh, I'm not looking to get married." Josh sighed. "This isn't about you, Felix. It's about Joy. You know how our circle works. Marriage is rarely about love. It's about connection, influence, and advantage. Let them know you're interviewing for the role." Felix stared into the shadows of his study, his chest heavy. The thought of replacing Carol felt impossible, but the image of Joy's empty eyes haunted him more. By mid-morning, Felix was already questioning his decision. His brother's words still echoed in his mind, but as he sat across from the first candidate in his office, the air felt unbearably heavy. Each interview was carefully scheduled during the hours Joy spent at school. His personal assistant, Emily, sat quietly to his right with a leather-bound notebook, jotting down every detail, the candidate's background, demeanor, answers to his questions about family, children, and public image. The first woman spoke eloquently about charity boards and high society gatherings, her smile poised but rehearsed. The second leaned heavily on ambition, weaving her answers into how she could elevate the Colton name. The third tried to soften her tone, speaking of her admiration for Joy's resilience, though Felix couldn't tell if it was genuine or memorized. Each interview stretched for an hour, yet to Felix it felt like much longer. He probed, listened, and studied every word, but all the while a hollow ache pressed against his chest. When the final candidate left, Felix leaned back in his chair, exhaustion written across his face. Emily closed her notebook gently. "That's all for today, Mr. Colton." Felix rubbed his temples. He had never felt more drained or more uncertain. The sound of the front door closing echoed softly through the house as Joy returned from school. Her small backpack slipped off her shoulder, landing on the floor with a dull thud. Emily, Felix's personal assistant, appeared from the living room with her usual bright smile. "Hey there, Joy," she said warmly. "Rough day." Joy shrugged, her shoulders not meeting her eyes. Emily chuckled lightly, shaking her head. You know, that's how I feel most days too. Sometimes words just don't cut it, huh? For the first time, a flicker of curiosity touched Joy's face. Emily reached for her hand with an easy gentleness. Come on, your dad's in his office. Want to go say hi? Joy didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. Emily led her down the hallway, her soft chatter filling the silence. When they entered the office, Felix was on the phone with his brother, his voice tight and businesslike. Emily caught his eye and gave a quick nod before guiding Joy to a seat near the window. Did you know, Emily said in a conspiratorial whisper, the zoo just opened a new bird sanctuary. They've got parrots, peacocks, even a pair of golden macaws. Bright feathers like sunshine. I bet you'd love it. Joy's eyes flickered for a moment, her lips twitching like she wanted to smile, but wasn't sure if she should. She leaned closer, listening quietly while Emily described the birds. When Felix finally ended his call, Emily rose gracefully. By the way, Joy's been invited to the zoo this Saturday. My family's going and we'd love for her, and you, if you're free, to join us. She glanced at Felix with a knowing smile before gathering her bag. Think about it. No pressure. After saying her goodbyes, Emily left the room, her presence lingering like sunlight in the space she vacated. Joy sat in silence for a moment, then looked up at her father. I like her, Dad, she said softly. She's nice. Felix studied his daughter, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. A warmth tugged at his heart, different from the cold calculations of the interviews earlier. Yes, she is, he admitted. Emily's only been working for me 3 months, but she's already proven herself. She's really great at her job. Joy tilted her head, a faint smile finally breaking through. For the first time in weeks, Felix saw a glimmer of life in her eyes, and it wasn't because of the candidates his brother had chosen. That night, as Felix paused by Joy's doorway, he froze at the sight before him. She was curled on her side, fast asleep, with the faded green and yellow parrot clutched tightly to her chest. The same parrot Carol had given her when she was 4. Felix leaned against the doorframe, his eyes stinging with tears. It was the first time in months he'd seen Joy reach for the toy, and the fragile hope it stirred in him almost undid him. Quietly, he whispered into the dark, "She's still with us, Carol. She's still holding on." The next morning at breakfast, Joy toyed with her spoon, her eyes avoiding his. Then in a timid voice she asked, "Dad, can we go to the zoo this weekend?" Felix set down his coffee cup. "I've got work, sweetheart, but if Emily doesn't mind taking you, it's all right with me." Joy just nodded silently, as if even asking had taken all the courage she had. Then she slipped off her chair and headed for school. That afternoon, Emily was still at the house finishing paperwork when Joy came through the door. Instead of the usual formal greetings, Emily greeted her with a grin and held up a brightly colored book. "Look what I found, a picture book on birds. Thought you might like it." Joy blinked in surprise but wandered over. Soon the two of them were sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through pages filled with parrots, owls, and exotic species with dazzling feathers. Emily pointed out each one with animated enthusiasm, and to Felix's astonishment, Joy leaned in, asking quiet questions. Curious, Felix stepped into the room. "What's going on in here?" Emily glanced up, her smile easy and unhurried. "Just a little bird watching, Mr. Colton. Joy seems to have an eye for the colorful ones." "Do you need me for anything?" Felix softened, shaking his head. "No, I don't need anything. We're done for the day." Emily gathered her things and rose. "Then I'll be on my way. Goodbye, Joy. Goodbye, Mr. Colton." As she moved toward the door, Joy's voice piped up, tentative but hopeful. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Emily hesitated, then shrugged. Gently, "Only if your dad needs me here." Joy nodded, her face falling into silence again. Felix watched the exchange closely, his heart heavy. For the first time, he began to realize maybe what Joy needed couldn't be scheduled or negotiated in an interview room. Felix sat on the edge of the couch, his daughter beside him, legs swinging above the floor. The late evening sun slanted through the windows, casting warm light across the room. He took a steadying breath before speaking, choosing his words carefully. "Joy," he began softly, "I've been thinking about you, about how lonely you've been since Mom passed." His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "I want you to have someone who can guide you, someone who can be there when I can't, not to replace your mother, but someone who can care for you in ways I can't always manage." Joy turned to look at him, her big brown eyes searching his face with quiet confusion. It was as if her father had just spoken in a language she didn't understand. After a long silence, she blinked, slid off the couch, and padded toward her room without a word. The soft click of her bedroom door closing made Felix's chest ache. By Saturday morning, however, Joy was awake earlier than usual. She stood by the tall living room window in her pajamas, peering out at the driveway like a sentinel awaiting a guest. Felix lingered nearby, pretending to read the newspaper, but he noticed every fidget, every nervous shift of her small frame. His heart clenched when he realized who she was waiting for. The door opened, and Emily stepped in, brisk and cheerful. "Hi, Joy! How are you feeling today?" Joy only shrugged. Emily laughed, unfazed. "That's okay. Some mornings I feel the same way." She bent slightly to meet the child's eyes. "Ready for our big day?" A small nod. That was enough. Felix watched as his daughter slipped her hand into Emily's without hesitation, something he hadn't seen her do with anyone in months. He felt a pang deep in his chest, half gratitude, half fear. The zoo trip was a success. Emily later described it in cheerful tones, but she also had pictures and short videos on her phone to prove it. Joy, leaning over the railing at the new bird sanctuary, pointing excitedly at the macaws. Joy, laughing as a goat nibbled her shoelaces in the petting zoo. Joy's shy but genuine smile as Emily's niece placed an ice cream cone in her hand. By the time they returned to the Colton estate, Joy's cheeks were flushed from the autumn. Air and her eyes sparkled with a liveliness Felix hadn't seen in so long. But as they stepped inside the grand foyer, the atmosphere shifted. Waiting in the sitting room were the three women Felix had reluctantly agreed to meet again, this time in Joy's presence. Emily handed off Joy's backpack and gave Felix a polite smile. "I'll leave you to your evening, Mr. Colton." She turned to Joy. "I'll see you soon, okay?" Joy's face fell, but she nodded bravely. Felix cleared his throat and gestured toward the sitting room. "Joy, there are some guests I'd like you to meet." Inside, the three women rose gracefully. Each representing a different facet of the elite circle, Felix moved in. The first candidate, Veronica Hale, a tall, striking and elegant. Veronica was the widow of a tech mogul. In her late 30s, she carried herself with impeccable poise and confidence. Draped in a fitted sapphire dress, she radiated an air of authority. Veronica was known for her philanthropic work in education, though her sharp eyes often betrayed a calculating nature. Felix knew her presence would command respect, but he wondered if Joy would feel warmth beneath her polished exterior. The second candidate, Cassandra Cassie Duval. At 30, Cassie was the youngest of the three and the most vibrant. She had a background in public relations and was beloved in social circles for her lively personality. Tonight, she wore a blush-pink gown, her laughter quick and musical, her charm effortless. Cassie's appeal lay in her ability to disarm anyone with her brightness, but Felix worried her energy might overwhelm his quiet, grieving daughter. And the third candidate, Margot Linton, distinguished and refined. Margot was the daughter of a political family and well-versed in diplomacy. In her mid-40s, she carried an aura of tradition and stability. Her emerald green suit was tailored to perfection, her pearls understated but meaningful. Felix knew that with Margot came a network of power and influence that few could rival, yet he wondered if her formality would ever translate into the kind of maternal tenderness Joy desperately needed. The three women greeted Joy with polite smiles. Veronica lowered herself slightly, her voice smooth. "You must be Joy. Your father has told us so much about you." Cassie crouched down with a grin. "Hi, sweetheart. I love your shoes. You know, when I was your age, I wore sparkly ones, just like those." Margot, by contrast, simply inclined her head, her smile soft but reserved. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Joy." Joy clutched her newly stuffed bird toy tightly against her chest, her earlier glow from the zoo dimming as the weight of expectation filled the room. Felix saw her retreat inward, her shoulders curling slightly. He exhaled slowly, torn between his brother's advice and the evidence before his eyes. Joy had blossomed today, but not with any of these women. It had been Emily who had made her laugh. Felix forced a smile, extending his hand toward the guests. "Shall we sit?" As Joy reluctantly followed, Felix felt the storm of choices tightening around him. Felix woke early, his mind restless. He had agreed, against his heart's quiet protest, that each of the three women would spend time with Joy that day. Margot for breakfast, Veronica for lunch, and Cassie for dinner. It was organized, efficient, almost like a business evaluation. But this wasn't about stock reports or corporate deals. This was about his daughter, his fragile little girl, who still clutched a worn parrot toy at night as if it could shield her from a world too heavy for her shoulders. Breakfast with Margot arrived precisely at 8 o'clock, punctual and polished. In a cream suit, she greeted Joy with polite warmth, then guided her to the breakfast table. "Good morning, dear. I thought we might try these muffins I brought. They're a family recipe." Joy, sitting stiffly at the table, glanced at Felix before taking a tentative bite. She chewed quietly, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. Margot filled the silence with measured conversation about school, manners, and the importance of tradition. Felix noticed how Joy's gaze drifted toward the window, her responses no more than nods. There was no spark, no curiosity, just endurance. Watching, Felix's heart sank. Margot was kind, but distant, like a teacher more than a mother. Lunch with Veronica at noon, Veronica swept in with commanding presence. She wore a sleek grey dress, her jewelry subtle but expensive. "Joy," she said smoothly, "how about we go out into the garden for lunch?" They dined under the pergola, sunlight filtering through the vines. Veronica asked direct questions about Joy's favorite subjects and hobbies, her tone confident, almost rehearsed. "Your father tells me you're very bright. What do you want to be when you grow up?" Joy shrugged, picking at her sandwich. "Don't know." Felix watched from a distance, his stomach twisting. Veronica smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She leaned in, speaking about her philanthropic work and the importance of strong role models. To an adult, it would have been impressive, persuasive, but to Joy, it was noise. Her face remained blank, her shoulders slumped. Felix rubbed his temple. Veronica was formidable, accomplished, everything their world admired. But he could see his daughter retreating further into herself with every polished word. Dinner with Cassie that evening, Felix still held out a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the last meeting would be different. Cassie breezed in like a spring breeze, dressed in a playful coral dress. She knelt down the moment she saw Joy. "Wow, is this your parrot? What's its name?" Joy's arms tightened protectively around the toy. "Rainbow." Cassie's smile widened. Rainbows. Perfect. You know, I used to have a stuffed dog named Max. He went everywhere with me, even to school once, though I got in trouble for it. To Felix's surprise, Joy's lips twitched, the faintest ghost of a smile flickering. Cassie had energy, yes, but she was disarming, meeting Joy where she was, rather than where adults thought she should be. Still, as dinner went on, Felix noticed Joy's amusement fade. Cassie filled the conversation with anecdotes, laughter ringing through the dining room. Joy listened, sometimes watching her with wide eyes, but she never spoke more than a few words. By dessert, she had withdrawn again, clutching Polly to her chest in silence. When Cassie finally left, the house grew quiet once more. Felix leaned against the doorway of Joy's room later that night, watching her curl beneath her blankets. She was silent, her expression unreadable. Inside, Felix battled with himself. Each woman had offered something valuable. Margot brought stability, Veronica strength, Cassie energy. Yet none of them had given Joy what she truly needed. He saw it in her distant eyes, in the way her small frame seemed to shrink beside them, and then another image surfaced. Joy leaning over the railing at the bird sanctuary, laughing with Emily. Her eyes bright, her voice unguarded. Emily's hand slipped easily into Joy's hand. Emily hadn't been trying to impress, hadn't been performing for a role. She was simply there. Felix pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the weight of the truth he didn't want to face. He had followed his brother's advice, arranged the meetings, played by the rules of their world. But for the first time in his life, Felix Colton, the man who built empires from strategy, realized he couldn't negotiate his daughter's happiness like a business merger. This was different. This was Joy, and she deserved something real. Felix poured himself a glass of scotch and sat heavily in the leather chair of his study. The events of the day replayed in his mind like a slideshow. Joy's downcast eyes at breakfast with Margot, her silence in the garden with Veronica, the fleeting smile that quickly vanished at dinner with Cassie. He had given the plan every chance, but it had failed. His daughter wasn't blossoming under their attention. She was shrinking. His phone buzzed on the desk. Josh's name lit the screen. Felix sighed, then picked it up. "Well?" Josh's voice came through, brisk, expectant. 3 strong candidates. Which one impressed Joy? Felix let out a humorless laugh. "None of them, Josh. Not a single one." There was silence on the line. Then Josh spoke again, measured. "Felix, maybe you're overthinking. Margot offers stability. Veronica commands respect. Cassie could bring Joy back into her life." "No!" Felix cut in sharply. He rubbed his temple, his frustration boiling over. "You didn't see her face, Josh. You didn't see how she folded into herself. Margot treated her like a student, Veronica like a polished project, Cassie like an audience. None of them saw her, not really. Joy doesn't need polish or pedigree. She needs someone who can meet her where she is." Josh exhaled, the faint sound of ice clinking against glass carrying through the line. "And where exactly are you going to find someone like that in our social group? Felix, be realistic. This isn't about fairy tales. It's about what works in our world." Felix's jaw tightened. He stared at the glowing amber liquid in his glass, then set it aside untouched. His voice softened but carried a rare conviction. "I already have someone." Josh's pause was long and weighted. "Who?" "My personal assistant," Felix admitted. "Emily." There was a stunned silence. Then Josh chuckled disbelievingly. "Emily? She's efficient, I'll give you that, but she's not a candidate, Felix. She's staff." Felix stood, pacing the room, his free hand clenched at his side. "You didn't see Joy at the zoo, Josh." She laughed. She asked questions. She lit up. When Emily talks to her, she doesn't try to fix her or force her into anything. She just listens. She just understands. Joy trusts her. Do you know how rare that is these days? She barely talks to me sometimes, but with Emily, she relaxes. Felix, think about what you're saying, Josh pressed, his tone edged. With warning. You're a Colton. Colton International thrives on alliances, appearances, the right matches. Emily isn't from our world. She has no family connections, no name, no influence. What possible advantage does she bring to the table? Felix stopped pacing and turned toward the darkened window, his reflection staring back at him. His answer was quiet, but steady. She brings joy back to life. That's all the advantage I care about. On the other end of the line, Josh sighed, deeply frustration simmering. You're letting grief cloud your judgment. This isn't about love. It's about... Felix cut him off again, more firmly this time. This isn't about me. And it sure as hell isn't about business. It's about joy. She doesn't need a woman who knows which fork to use at a gala. She needs a woman who can sit on the floor with her, open a book, and remind her that the world is still worth exploring. Josh was silent, as if he knew pressing further would be useless. Finally, he muttered, "You'll do what you want, as always." Felix lowered the phone, ending the call. His chest felt lighter and heavier, all at once. For the first time since Carol's death, he knew what direction he needed to take, not because it benefited Colton International, not because it pleased his brother, but because it made his daughter smile. He glanced toward the hallway where Joy's room lay quiet, the faint glow of her nightlight seeping into the shadows. He whispered to himself, Emily isn't a candidate. She's the answer. The next following day, Felix was leaning against the doorframe of his office, staring at Emily with uncharacteristic hesitation. Finally, he spoke. Emily, I need a favor. I'll be out of town for a few days, business I can't reschedule. Would you be willing to stay with Joy while I'm gone? Emily looked up from her notes, surprise flickering in her eyes. Of course. Mr. Colton, if that's what you need. Thank you, Felix said simply, though inside he felt far from simple. He was testing something, testing himself most of all, testing whether his instincts about her and Joy were true. From his suite at the hotel, Felix told himself it was only natural to check in. Joy was his daughter, after all. The estates. Camera feeds were just a click away, and late at night he found himself watching them more than reviewing business reports. On the first evening he saw Joy in the kitchen with Emily, both wearing oversized aprons dusted with flour. Joy's laughter rang through the speakers as Emily pretended to sneeze into the mixing bowl, making Joy giggle uncontrollably. They baked cookies, then sat at the counter decorating them with uneven frosting and sprinkles scattered everywhere. The next day, Felix watched them sitting on the living room rug, singing along to a silly children's song on television. Emily's voice was terrible, loud, off-key, playful, but Joy sang right along, her eyes shining. Later they played board games, Emily cheering dramatically whenever Joy won, falling back on the rug as if defeated. Joy beamed, arms thrown up, in victory. The peace. By the third day, Felix no longer felt like a spectator. He felt like a father rediscovering his daughter through someone else's eyes. Joy hadn't laughed like that in over a year. His throat tightened as he watched, both grateful and ashamed. It had taken someone else stepping in for him to see his little girl light up again. When Felix finally returned home, the air in the house felt different, lighter, warmer. Joy greeted him at the door with a smile that stunned him. We made cookies, Daddy, and Emily taught me how to beat her at Monopoly. Felix chuckled, pulling her into a hug. Did she? Later that evening, once Joy was settled with her homework, Felix called Emily into his office. She entered, professional as always, a notebook in hand. You wanted to see me, Mr. Colton? He gestured for her to sit. I wanted to ask you something personal. Emily arched a brow but nodded. All right. Felix folded his hands. choosing his words carefully. "What's your opinion about me getting married? Not love stories or fairy tales, just the idea of it." Emily tilted, her head considering. "Honestly, I think getting married for the wrong reasons can be more harmful than helpful. A marriage built on appearances or strategy or obligation, it doesn't last. And worse, it can hurt all the people who is involved." Her words hit him harder than he expected. She had no idea how closely they mirrored his conflict. He nodded slowly. "I see. Thank you for your honesty." Emily smiled lightly. "Why do you ask?" Instead of answering, Felix leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Emily, Joy has grown so much with you these past few days, more than she has with anyone else in months. Watching her, I realized something." He hesitated, then continued, "Would you consider becoming her nanny? Officially, instead of my assistant?" Emily blinked in shock. "Her nanny? Mr. Colton, that's unexpected." Felix chuckled, a rare warmth in his voice. "You'd still work for me, but in a different way. Joy needs you more than I do in the office, and between us," he gave a wry smile, "marrying someone just to give Joy a stepmother would be awful. I think we both agree on that." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "Yes, that would be awful." Felix leaned back, letting the tension ease for the first time in weeks. For the first time since Carol's death, he felt like he had taken a step toward something right. And Joy finally had someone to bring laughter back into her world. Emily slipped into her new role with surprising ease, though perhaps Felix shouldn't have been surprised at all. She'd mentioned before that she had nieces and nephews, and it showed. She knew when to coax Joy into a game and when to let her sit in silence. She knew how to make math homework less of a battle, how to turn chores into a competition, and how to spot the warning signs of a nightmare before they overtook the night. Most importantly, she never tried to replace Carol. She spoke about Joy's mother with respect, listening quietly when Joy wanted to share a memory and never pushing when she didn't. She was simply there, filling the spaces of loneliness with warmth rather than noise. The change in Joy was noticeable within weeks. Her laughter came easier, her appetite returned, and her therapist, who had been a steady presence for months, finally leaned back in her chair during one session, a satisfied smile tugging at her lips. "Mr. Colton," she said, "I think we can scale back. Joy is making remarkable progress. She's re-engaging with the world, and that's the most important sign." Felix exhaled, relief flooding him. "So she doesn't need to come as often?" "Exactly. Let her live. Let her grow. She has what she needs at home now." That evening, Felix called Josh, his tone lighter than it had been in months. "Joy's therapist says she's doing so well we can cut back on sessions." "That's excellent news," Josh replied, though his voice carried the sharpness Felix had come to expect. "So now that Joy's better, what about you?" Felix frowned. "What about me?" "You need to get back out there. Start dating again. It's time." Felix leaned back in his chair, swirling the untouched scotch in his glass. "Josh, not everything is about appearances or partnerships. Joy's happiness matters more to me than some dinner party match," Josh pressed. "I just hope you don't wait too long." Felix let the words hang, offering no answer. As the weeks passed, Felix found himself observing Emily more closely. She excelled in her role with Joy, but he noticed something else too, subtle, almost imperceptible changes. Emily had begun creating boundaries between him and her. Emily no longer lingered in the evenings once Joy was settled. She kept her conversations with Felix polite, professional, even guarded. And though she always smiled, there was a certain distance in her eyes that hadn't been there before. One night, after Joy was asleep, Felix found Emily tidying the kitchen. "Emily," he said softly, "have I done something wrong?" She looked up, startled. "No, of course not, Mr. Colton." Felix didn't understand the change. "But You've been different lately, avoiding me, keeping to yourself. Is something bothering you? He asked. Her smile was calm, practiced. You're imagining things. But Felix wasn't convinced. The dismissal lingered with him long after she left, stirring frustration he couldn't quite explain. The following day, unable to shake it, he called Josh. Something's off with Emily, Felix admitted. She says nothing's wrong, but I can feel it. Josh gave a low chuckle. Let me ask you something, brother. Have you been spending more time with them more than usual? Felix paused, caught off guard. His mind retraced the past few weeks, sitting down to dinner with them instead of working late, joining their weekend outings, even stepping into the living room to watch as Joy and Emily built towers of blocks. His voice was quieter when he answered. Well, yes, I've been taking more time. Joy's so happy now, I don't want to miss it. Josh's voice sharpened. Is it just about Joy, or is there more? Felix froze, staring at the glass in his hand. The silence stretched between them, thick and telling. For the first time, he couldn't immediately answer, because the truth, though unspoken, was pressing on him harder every day. It wasn't just about Joy anymore. Felix couldn't sleep. He sat in his study long after midnight, the house silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. He'd replayed Josh's question over and over. Is it just about Joy, or is there more? At first, he'd wanted to dismiss it. Of course, it was about Joy. Everything he'd done for the last year had been for her. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the whole truth. He thought of the way Emily laughed when Joy teased her, unguarded and genuine. The way she filled the silence of the house with warmth, not with polished charm, but with something steady and real. He thought of her flour-dusted apron, her voice singing off-key just to make Joy smile, the way she listened as if both father and daughter mattered more than any agenda. And then he thought of her pulling back, the way she excused herself earlier. In the evenings, the professional smile she hid behind when he asked if something was wrong. It frustrated him because he had spent years reading boardrooms and opponents, yet when it came to Emily, he couldn't see through the mask. No, he admitted to himself, it isn't just about Joy anymore. Meanwhile, in the guest house where she stayed, Emily sat curled on the couch with a mug of tea cooling in her hands. She stared out the window into the dark, her mind a tangle. She had taken the job as Joy's nanny willingly, knowing Felix needed someone, knowing Joy needed more. But somewhere along the way, the boundaries had blurred. She'd caught herself, noticing Felix more often than she should, the quiet strength in his voice when he comforted Joy, the rare softness in his eyes when he looked at his daughter. She admired his discipline, his steadiness, his protectiveness, and it scared her. The Colton family was not her world. She was staff, not a socialite, not a polished candidate from Felix's circle. If she let her feelings grow, she risked everything. Her job, her stability, and worst of all, Joy's progress. Joy needed her, but not as a woman tangled up in complicated feelings for her father. So she had pulled back, set boundaries, kept her distance. At least, she tried to. But every time Joy slipped her small hand into hers, every time Felix lingered. In the doorway watching them, Emily felt the fragile walls of her resolve weaken. This is dangerous, she told herself. You can't afford to lose control. Felix noticed it more and more. Dinner felt emptier when Emily excused herself early. Joy's laughter in the afternoons rang through the halls, but when Felix joined them, Emily shifted, retreating into the background. Finally, one evening, when Joy had gone upstairs to bed, Felix intercepted her at the door. "Emily," he said firmly, "we need to talk." She stopped, her hand hovering on her bag strap. "About what?" "About you," Felix said, "and about me. You've been avoiding me." Her eyes widened slightly. "I haven't—" "Yes, you have," Felix pressed, frustration threading his voice. You've been different ever since—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Emily forced a smile, calm and polite. "You're imagining things, Mr. Colton." Felix's chest tightened at the formality in her tone. Mr. Colton. It was a wall she hadn't used with him in months. He opened his mouth to argue again, but something in her expression stopped him. There was fear in her eyes, not of him, but of something she couldn't name aloud. For the first time, Felix realized she might be struggling with the same battle he was. Later that night, unable to let it rest, he called Josh again. "You were right," Felix admitted quietly. Josh's voice sharpened. "About what?" "I've been spending more time with them more than usual. At first I told myself it was for Joy, but it isn't just about her anymore." There was silence on the line, heavy and telling. Josh finally exhaled. "I suspected as much. Felix, you're walking into dangerous territory." "I know," Felix muttered, "but she makes Joy happy. She makes me—" He stopped, unwilling to finish the sentence. Josh's tone was blunt. "She's not from our circle. She won't be accepted easily. The board will never see her as the next Mrs. Colton." Felix pinched the bridge of his nose. "This isn't about the board, isn't it?" Josh challenged. "Every choice you make ripples through Colton International. Your image, your alliances, your family's legacy, it all matters. You've built an empire. Do you really want to risk it for your assistant?" Felix didn't answer right away. He glanced at the staircase where Joy slept peacefully, at the empty hallway where Emily's laughter sometimes lingered. He thought of how silent the house had been before she arrived. Finally, he said quietly, "For once in my life, Josh, I care more about my daughter's happiness than the board's approval. And maybe my own." Josh groaned. "You're playing with fire." Felix gave a humorless laugh. "Maybe, but for the first time since Carol died, the fire feels alive." In the guest room that same night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She replayed Felix's words in the doorway, the intensity in his eyes, the way he had seen through her denial. She whispered into the dark, "What are you doing, Emily?" But deep down, she already knew. The morning sun poured through the tall windows as Felix sat at the breakfast table with Joy. She pushed her cereal around in the bowl, absent-mindedly, before looking up at him with wide, searching eyes. "Dad," she said suddenly, "is Emily going to be my stepmom?" Felix nearly choked on his coffee. He set the cup down, blinking at her. "What makes you ask that?" Joy tilted her head, her expression serious. "Because you said you were looking for a mom for me, and I see how you look at Emily. You like her, and she likes you." Felix leaned back, stunned. "How do I look at her?" Joy gave him the kind of knowing smile only a child could deliver. "The same way you looked at Mom. Not the same, but close. She hasn't made you laugh like Mom did yet, but she could. And Emily always puts on this funny smile every time she sees you. Then she runs out of the room, like she's embarrassed." Felix rubbed the back of his neck, trying to hide his own smile. "Joy, I'm not ready to get married." She leaned forward, eyes sparkling. "Then maybe a date. That's not the same as married." "Joy." Before he could finish, she jumped to her feet, clapping her hands. "Okay then, let's make it happen. Tonight you and Emily are having dinner in the garden, and I'll stay in my room so you can talk." Felix opened his mouth to protest, but the determination in his daughter's face stopped him. He saw Carol in that stubborn tilt of her chin. With a sigh, he muttered, "You're far too clever for your age." That evening, as twilight draped the estate in soft purples and golds, Emily returned from the market to find the garden transformed. A small table had been set under the pergola, candles flickering in the gentle breeze. A meal was laid out, elegant but intimate, the kind of setting one might expect for an anniversary rather than a weekday dinner. She stopped in her tracks. What is this?" Felix stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. His expression carried the faintest curve of amusement. "We're having our first date, at Joy's request." Emily blinked, color rushing to her cheeks. "A date?" Felix nodded, his eyes steady on hers. "Yes," she insisted. "And I couldn't say no." Emily's hand rose to her chest, as if to steady herself. For a moment, she looked as though she might bolt, but then she caught Felix's gaze, calm, patient, expectant. Something in her softened. She let out a breath, laughing nervously. "That girl." "She gets it from her mother," Felix said quietly. Emily hesitated, then allowed herself to be guided to the table. "So this is Joy's doing, not yours?" she asked as she settled into her chair. Felix smirked. "That depends. Do you want me to say it was mine?" Emily blushed deeper, looking away. "I think I'd rather not answer that." Dinner began awkwardly, but soon the walls between them began to ease. Felix asked her about her family, her childhood. Emily told him about growing up with 3 younger siblings, about helping raise her nieces and nephews when her older sister went back to school. Her eyes lit up when she spoke about them, her voice animated with affection. "And you?" she asked, turning the conversation. "What were you like before all this?" Felix leaned back, thinking. "Driven, focused. Colton International was everything. I thought if I kept building, kept pushing, I could give Carol and Joy the world." His eyes grew distant. "But the truth is, I didn't realize how much of the world I was missing until it was too late." Emily's expression softened. "You gave Joy the best gift you could, Felix. You were there when it mattered. That's more than most people can say." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was gentle, comfortable, as if the night itself had wrapped them in a quiet cocoon. Felix studied her across the candlelight. "You've changed things, Emily. For Joy. For me." Her blush returned, but this time she didn't look away. Instead, she held his gaze for a moment before laughing softly, breaking the tension. They lingered long after the plates had gone cold, their conversation weaving effortlessly from childhood stories to favorite books to memories of people they'd loved and lost. There were moments of laughter, moments of quiet reflection, and through it all, a thread of ease neither of them could deny. As Emily finally rose to leave, Felix walked her to the edge of the garden. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what? For tonight? For Joy? For being you?" Emily hesitated, her eyes glistening in the candlelight. "Good night, Felix." She turned quickly, as though afraid of staying a moment longer, and disappeared into the house. Felix stood under the pergola, listening to the rustle of leaves in the night air, his chest tight but alive. Upstairs, he knew Joy was probably peeking out her window, her little matchmaker's plan unfolding exactly as she'd hoped. For the first time in years, Felix allowed himself to smile. Joy padded barefoot down the hallway, her stuffed parrot tucked under her arm. She stopped in front of the guest wing where Emily stayed, hesitated for a moment, then raised her little hand and knocked softly. Emily opened the door, surprised to see her small visitor. "Joy? What are you doing up? It's late." Joy slipped past her without answering, climbing onto the edge of the bed. She hugged her parrot close and fixed Emily with a serious look. "Do you like my dad?" Emily froze in the doorway, caught completely off guard. "What?" "You heard me," Joy insisted, her voice small but steady. "Do you like him? Because I think you do. You smile funny every time he looks at you. And you went on a date tonight." Emily sat down beside her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sweetheart, your dad and we just had dinner. It wasn't—" Joy interrupted with a shake of her head. "You blushed. I saw you. Dad smiled too. Not like he does for other people, like he did for Mom." Emily's breath caught, emotions tangling inside her chest. She reached out and smoothed Joy's hair. "Joy, your dad is a wonderful man, and I care about both of you very much. But some things take time." Joy's eyes softened. "That's okay. You don't have to marry him tomorrow. But I think you'd be a good stepmom, better than the ladies he brought here." Emily blinked back sudden tears. "You're something else, you know that?" Joy grinned proudly, slipping off the bed and heading for the door. "I just know what I see." She hugged her parrot tighter. "Good night, Emily. Don't worry, I'll help." Before Emily could respond, the little girl was gone, padding back down the hall. Emily sat in stunned silence, her heart racing. For the first time, she admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny. Joy wasn't imagining things, and neither was Felix. Josh arrived at the Colton estate unannounced, his expression stormy. As he strode into the study where Felix was reviewing documents, "I heard about the garden dinner," Josh said sharply, his voice low but cutting. "A date with your assistant. Felix, have you completely lost perspective?" Felix didn't look up immediately. He stacked his papers neatly, then leaned back in his chair. "It wasn't your business to hear about." Josh scoffed. "It becomes my business when it risks the family's reputation. Do you know what people will say if they find out? A Colton, one of the most powerful men in the city, dating his nanny? Do you think the board will respect that? Do you think shareholders won't talk?" Before Felix could respond, a small voice interrupted. "Why would you stop them from being happy?" Both men turned. Joy stood in the doorway, her stuffed parrot clutched tightly to her chest, her eyes bright with determination. "Joy," Felix began gently, rising to his feet. But she shook her head, her gaze locked on her uncle. "Why should we care what other people think?" she demanded, her voice trembling but clear. "None of them even bothered to see how my dad was doing after my mom's funeral. They don't care about me. They don't care about us." Her small fists tightened around the toy. "So why should we care about them?" Josh blinked, momentarily stunned. He opened his mouth, but Joy pressed on, her words pouring out like a flood. "You talk about reputation, about what people think. But you don't know what it's like to wake up every night because your mom isn't there. You don't know what it's like to see your dad trying to smile when he's breaking inside. Emily makes us laugh again. She makes us feel like a family again. Isn't that what matters?" Her voice cracked and tears welled in her eyes. "I just want us to be happy. Isn't that more important than what strangers think?" The room went still. Josh stared at his niece, his usual sharpness stripped away. In her face he saw a side of her he hadn't seen since Carol's passing, the raw vulnerability, the unfiltered honesty of a child who had lost too much too soon. Felix moved to his daughter's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. He didn't need to add anything. Joy's words had said it all. Josh swallowed hard, the weight of her emotions pressing into him. He had always prided himself on logic, on protecting the family name above all else. But looking at Joy, small, fierce and broken in ways he couldn't fix, something inside him shifted. He started, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. His tone softened for the first time that evening. "Joy, I didn't realize." Joy sniffled, hugging her parrot close. "You should have. Your family." Josh looked at Felix, then back at his niece. The fight in him had drained away, replaced by something unfamiliar, guilt, perhaps even shame. Maybe I was wrong," he admitted quietly. Joy didn't answer. She simply turned to her father's side, leaning against him. Felix wrapped his arm around her, steady and strong, his eyes locked with his brother's in silent challenge. For once, Josh had no rebuttal. And in that moment, the Colton legacy mattered less than the fragile little girl who had just reminded him what family truly meant. After Joy had gone upstairs for the night, Felix and Josh remained in the study. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Felix broke it. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice steady. Josh arched a brow. And what decision is that? Felix poured himself a drink, though he didn't touch it. I'm stepping back from Colton International. Effective immediately. I want you to take control. Josh froze. You can't be serious. I am, Felix said simply. This last year I've buried myself in work because it was easier than facing the truth. Carol is gone. My daughter needed me, and I told myself building the company bigger, stronger was for her. But Joy doesn't need another merger or another tower with our name on it. She needs me, and I need to grieve properly and rediscover what life looks like without hiding behind boardrooms and balance sheets. Josh's expression hardened, as though bracing for battle. And what about this thing with Emily? Are you throwing away the company for her? Felix shook his head. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing differently. Emily... He hesitated, then continued. Emily brings out something. In Joy I thought was lost forever. Maybe she and I are only meant to be friends. Maybe it's more. I don't know yet. But I won't let fear of society's opinions stop me from finding out. For once, I want to live for Joy and myself. Not the Colton name. Josh stared at his brother, stunned. He'd expected excuses, denial, maybe even defiance. He hadn't expected clarity. Felix's words carried a quiet conviction that shook him. At last, Josh sighed. If you're stepping back, then I'll take the company. But don't expect me to protect you from the gossip, Felix. They'll talk. Let them, Felix replied evenly. They always do. I've stopped listening. Josh studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. All right. But whatever happens, don't lose sight of who you are. You've always been the one holding us together. Felix gave a faint smile. Now it's your turn. When Josh left, the house seemed quieter, freer somehow. Felix lingered in the study for a moment, then made his way down the hall. He found Emily in the kitchen, rinsing a few dishes from Joy's bedtime snack. She looked up, startled. Oh, Mr. Colton, I didn't expect to see you. Felix, he interrupted gently. Just Felix. She blinked, her hands stilling. Felix, then. Did you need something? He leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't masking his emotions. I spoke with Josh tonight. I told him I'm stepping back from the company. He'll take over. Her brows furrowed. You're leaving Colton International? Not leaving, he clarified. Stepping back. For too long I've hidden in that world instead of facing my own. It's time I give myself permission to grieve properly, to rediscover life with joy, and maybe, his eyes held hers, to see what's brewing between us. Emily froze, her cheeks warming. Felix, I don't expect answers, he said quickly. And I don't want to put you in a corner. But I want you to know I'm not concerned about what people in my society think. They didn't come when Carol died. They didn't sit through the sleepless nights or the tears. But you showed up, for Joy, for me. That matters more than 1,000 board members whispering at their cocktail parties. Her throat tightened, words caught somewhere between denial and hope. This is a lot, Felix. He stepped closer, his voice low, steady. I know, and I don't want to rush anything. Maybe we're only meant to be friends. Maybe it's more, but I can't ignore what's here, not anymore. I need to see if this is real. Emily looked down, drying her hands slowly. She wanted to retreat, to build another wall, but something in his voice, raw, unpolished, honest, broke through. When she finally looked back up, her eyes glistened. I don't know where this will go, she admitted softly, but I do know Joy deserves to be happy, and so do you. Felix's chest eased, as if a weight had lifted. He gave a small smile, rare but genuine. Then we'll start there. For the first time in a long time, he felt the path forward wasn't dictated by reputation or expectation, but by choice, his choice. And this time, he was choosing life. It didn't take long. Once word spread that Felix Colton had stepped back. From Colton International, the whispers began. Society circles hummed with speculation. At galas and fundraisers, in the lounges of country clubs and the sleek dining rooms of five-star restaurants, his name was passed from one polished mouth into another. He's lost his edge, one socialite sniffed over champagne. Grief has finally undone him, another added. And to think he's keeping company with his assistant, came the sharp whisper that cut deepest of all. The board members weren't any kinder. At an emergency gathering, concerns were raised, voices sharp with panic. Our reputation will falter, one declared. The shareholders will panic. This looks like weakness. Felix listened to the reports of gossip with calm detachment. For years, he had bent his life to fit the expectations of this world. But now, he only cared about two people, his daughter and the woman who had brought her laughter back. When the press demanded an interview, Felix didn't hesitate. He told them to meet him on the front steps of the Colton estate. That Saturday morning, cameras lined the driveway, microphones thrust forward as Felix appeared. But what stunned the reporters wasn't just Felix. It was Joy, holding his hand. As they walked together to the podium, "Good morning," Felix began, his voice strong though his heart beat fast. "You've heard rumors, so let me address them directly. Yes, I have stepped back from Colton International. My brother Josh will be taking the reins. He's more than capable. This decision wasn't made out of weakness, but out of love for my daughter and for my late wife. For too long I buried myself in work rather than facing my grief. I forgot that my most important role isn't CEO, it's father. Joy deserves my time, my presence, and my heart, and I won't apologize for choosing her." He paused, glancing at Joy. She squeezed his hand, and the cameras caught her small, encouraging smile. "As for Emily Harper," Felix continued, his voice steady, "she has been a friend to my daughter in her darkest moments, and to me as well. We are not dating, but I won't deny that we are getting to know one another better, and perhaps, someday, that might change." The crowd erupted in questions, but Felix raised a hand. "This is all I'll say for now. My private life is just that, private, but I will never hide the fact that Joy is my priority, always." He ended the interview by lifting Joy into his arms and walking back into the house, ignoring the flashing lights and shouted questions. The effect was immediate. By that afternoon, headlines shifted. Felix Colton, a father first. From CEO to dad, Colton steps back to heal. Colton honesty wins public sympathy, and most importantly, Colton International stock rose 6 points. The market, it seemed, valued transparency and authenticity more than polished gossip. Josh called later that evening, his voice unusually warm. "You did it, brother. You turned it around. I'm proud of you. You didn't spin a narrative. You told the truth, and it worked." Felix smiled faintly. "The truth was all I had left, Josh. Turns out it was enough." Emily, meanwhile, had watched the entire interview on her tablet from the quiet of the guest house. She hadn't known Felix planned to name her. Her first reaction had been shock. Her cheeks flushed, her stomach knotted. But as his words sank in, her heart softened. He hadn't used her to make a statement. He hadn't turned her into a shield against gossip. He had spoken honestly, acknowledging her role in Joy's life and admitting that he wanted to see where things could lead. He had defended her without promises, without pretenses, and without shame. That night, when Felix came to check on Joy, Emily lingered in the kitchen, waiting. "Felix," she said softly as he entered. He stopped, studying her carefully. "Emily," she hesitated, her hands twisting together. "I saw the interview. You didn't have to say any of that." "I did," Felix replied, "because it's the truth." Her eyes shone, vulnerable but unafraid. "Then maybe it's time I stopped running from the truth." She drew in a breath steadying herself. I don't know where this will go, but I'm ready to see. Felix's chest tightened, relief flooding him. For weeks he had sensed her pulling away, terrified of crossing invisible lines. But now she was choosing to step closer. Neither of us knows where this will end, he admitted quietly. But we'll take it one step at a time. Together. Emily's smile was small, but genuine. Together. From the staircase above, Joy peeked around the banister, her parrot tucked under her arm. A wide grin spread across her face. A year later, the Colton estate felt alive in ways Felix once thought impossible. Joy's laughter carried through the halls, her footsteps light and playful. Emily was no longer just the nanny. She had become family, though no one had yet spoken the words aloud. One golden afternoon, Felix found Joy sitting in the garden swing, her stuffed parrot still at her side, though now it seemed more like an old friend than a shield. She looked up at her dad, her expression far too wise for her age. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart." She hesitated, then spoke with quiet certainty. "I think I'm ready for a mom, if you're ready for a wife." Felix blinked, his heart clenching. The simplicity of her words carried the weight of everything they had lost, and everything they had rebuilt. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Are you sure?" Joy nodded. "I see the way you look at Emily. The way she makes you laugh now. She makes us both happy. Mum would want that." Felix swallowed hard, his throat tight. Out of the mouths of children came truths too pure to deny. That evening, as twilight settled over the back garden where his journey with Emily had quietly begun, Felix led her outside. The air was scented with roses, and lanterns glowed softly along the path. "Felix?" Emily asked, confused by the setup. He turned to her, nerves fluttering for the first time in years. "Emily Harper. You came into our lives when we were broken. You gave Joy laughter again. You gave me hope again. I don't know what I'd be without you, but I know I don't want to find out." Her eyes widened as he sank to one knee, a velvet box in hand. "Will you marry me?" For a moment Emily could only cover her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Then she nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will." From the terrace above, Joy clapped her hands, her face lit with pure delight. At last, the Coltons weren't just surviving, they were whole again. The end. Thanks for listening to Green Tea Tales Story. Support our channel with comments and don't forget to subscribe.